Hi, my name is Alex Jen. I'm an art history student at Williams College, and today I'll be talking about women and photography, past and present. Um, this is a final presentation for a class that I've taken at Bennington called Women and Photography, um, thinking about women having been left out of the medium since the very beginning and how we only think about photography and the medium as being something dominated by men, sort of by practices that discriminate and don't allow women to be in the practice. One of the central questions um, that we had was, do we need women-only photo exhibitions? This idea of if we're trying to include them, trying to make up for lost time by putting or mounting exhibitions devoting or celebrating women-only photo, are we then further excluding them from the group? And so my sort of answer, actually no, not an answer, was my response was yes, but only if men aren't repeatedly mentioned in their frameworks. Because you have Henry Fox Talbot's wife who made the first photograph, or you have Edward Weston's assistant. And that's how we've always referred to women photographers in the practice. And so, even in an exhibition like Who's Afraid of Women Photographers, when we celebrated women, we still consider them as, here are a bunch of women photographers as mothers, sort of not really getting anywhere beyond um, the stereotypical boundaries that we've set up for them. Actually, before we jump into this, I think it's important that we pull back a little. Um, let's think of the idea of this course, Women in Photography, Past and Present. The course will have two components: a historic and contemporary examination of how women have shaped the discipline of photography. We will read first-hand accounts from artists and historians. Part of the course will focus on the myriad of radical contributions by female artists who utilize the medium for artistic, political, and practical purposes. Yeah, but but wait a minute. Linda Nochlin wrote her essay in 1971. Why have there been no great women artists? The question tolls reproachfully in the background of most discussions of the so-called women problem. But like so many other so-called questions involved in the feminist controversy, it falsifies the nature of the issue at the same time that it insidiously supplies its own answer. There are no great women artists because women are incapable of greatness. Nochlin's, so I can go to my notes here. Nochlin was sort of not making the case that there are certain forgotten, underappreciated women artists, which there are. That wasn't her main argument. She was saying that the system of art, the system of, let's say, photography, has left out women, has relegated them to Edward Weston's assistant, to carrying the camera, to helping with all the finances or whatever in Henry Fox Talbot's studio. And this is the quote that I picked from the Nochlin essay. Would Senor Ruiz have paid as much attention or stimulated as much ambition for achievement in a little Pablita? And Linda Nochlin wrote her essay in 1971, questioning how men, in this case, were given chances to apprentice because they were seeing that they could become artists, whereas women were relegated to the kitchen, relegated to childbearing. There was this idea that that was the only thing they could do, so forget it even if they showed a little bit of artistic talent. There was no point in wasting money on their apprenticeship. That is the problem that we have here. But Gorilla. Okay, Gorilla. But the Gorilla Girls did this. Let's say I pull up this most famous image of them. Do women have to be naked to get into the Met Museum? Less than 5% of the artists in the modern art sections are women, but 85% of the nudes are female. They did this in 1989. And, part of me wonders, in doing culminating presentations like this, what is the value of repeating these stats over and over again? One of them is to really show that there has been a very slow movement. But maybe the other sort of way about this is to consider why the movement has been so slow. They've updated, Guerrilla Girls have updated this poster every couple of years, and the statistics get marginally better. But think about APAD in 2015, as Shelby shared in the class. 20% of the exhibiting photographers in that show were women. Only 20%. Like, that is like a fraction of all of these photographers in the show. And Zoe Leonard, takes lines from Linda Nochlund's essay. In 2018, what is that? 29 plus 18, 49, almost 50 years later, she puts up vinyl. Why have there been no great women artists in the curatorial offices of the Whitney? As if to remind the curators, who should know this, I guess, on a daily basis, that, hey, you're not including women artists in your exhibitions. Hey, we know that, Claus Oldenburg and Frank Stella and Jasper Johns and whatever, like, they're great. Nothing against them. Hey, we know Sterling Ruby's great. Hey, we know I don't know. I mean, I'm just riffing off of like the artists I've seen in exhibitions before. There haven't been women, like, it's almost as if the women are not paid attention to. But the question is of the system. 50 years later, we're still dealing with this problem. The system excludes and doesn't allow the opportunity for women to even be included in the first place. And when I see a piece like this, 50 years later after the essay was supposed to be so radical, I wonder if, repeating these presentations and repeatedly noting that, the system is the thing that oppresses, like, that was radical, but now it's repeated so much that I feel like it's entered into people's minds as, okay, the system is oppressed. That is the big issue that we have to fight. I wonder if by getting so hung up on that question of the system, or the oppression of women on a larger scale, that almost undermines or sort of like takes away from the pressure the part where we actually look at women's work. I mean, look at the end of Ava Raspini's Aperture article on Defiance, where she talks about experimentation in the medium. She chooses to end the essay with a quote from artist Emily Royston. The 2010 catalog, Modern Women, at the Museum of Modern Art, she perhaps expressed it best. Artists today are not protesting what we don't want, but performing what we do want. And you should let the women perform and realize that throughout all these hardships, throughout all these systematic oppressions, they have been making work. Barbara Kasten has been there. Barbara Kasten is twice the age of Thomas DeMond, and she's been there the whole entire time making work. And I think there are two things that we need to do. Pay attention to these artists, and also pay attention to the system, but don't let one or the other overshadow you. These two things are almost fighting each other in conversation. It's like, should we put more emphasis on the system, so to speak, but then we ignore individual artists who are experimenting, or if we sort of look at the experimental nature of these artists, but don't pay attention to the system, it's like, of course, the system is largely oppressive. So that's the question that I'm wrestling with, or I will wrestle with in this presentation. And I am coming to this as an art history major person and interested in writing. Never really made that much, but actually, I want to show you some of the photographs I've been making. I guess I always started out gravitating towards the stark and dramatic. Do you know Greg Crutzen? Let me tell you how much I loved Greg Crutzen. Look at this right here. Let's see if we go to Gregory Crutzen. Look at this. This is so, I can't really see that. This is so painterly, and it's so dramatic, and it's so, I guess he has a documentary about the the making of his own photography. Uh, I don't. Um. Uh. Okay. But look at these photographs. They're so sinister and they're so dark. There's one naked woman on the couch. There's a clothed woman on the couch. They're in the snow. This is an old, dilapidated house. Look at this. Light coming down from the alien. Like, these were dark, good photographs. This is what I was interested in. And Robert Irwin is an artist that, as you've heard me talk about, so important to me. Light and space. He's known for saying, well, not really saying, but he's known for being interviewed in a book by Lawrence Weschler where he quotes, "Seeing is forgetting the name of the thing one sees." Isn't that great? I mean, it's like you're so phenomenologically caught up in the thing that you're seeing that there is some unseen force or something that is felt that you can't quite describe that really pulls you, that has like a physical, emotional response to you. That's Robert Irwin. And Ellsworth Kelly. This guy, master of color and light and form. Look at the way, look at that green and blue next to each other. Look at the black on top of the yellow. The yellow just scooting out a little bit. There's something about the tension here between the thin blue line, the big yellow, and the small red that is so elegant and so intimate in the way that he's hand painting them, and he chooses like the perfect colors. So these were the artists, Gregory Cruden's seriousness almost, or the darkness, the starkness that I wanted to convey in photography, mixed in with Robert Irwin, Ellsworth Kelly, and these are the photographs that I look to. Ellsworth Kelly photographs made right before he died. I mean, if you look at this little shed here, kind of looks like a Judd box with the shadow just cutting down. You get black, you get white, light and dark. Yeah, this is what I was interested in. And I was interested in questions of form. Like, you can't really see this right now, but there was like a brown paper cup on the windowsill over there. There's glass brick behind it, and the light is just shining through it. And that is like a human trace. That is human forms right there. Like someone came in and they left that there. And so someone was once here, and that is what I'm interested in. The dust on the windowsill. The like when I was first making photographs, like I thought like those were, things that spoke of intimacy, things that spoke of someone once being there. And I was so pissed off. Let me tell you why I was pissed off. Because we'd be in crit, right, and everyone gets 15 minutes. And after the 15 minutes are up, when we talk about my photographs, we're done. A box shining with light, handprints on a wall. Everyone's like, okay, there's some sort of eeriness there, there's some starkness there, and then we'd stop. Whereas if you have like a photograph of like someone who sort of like sourced from magazines or from old archival material, looking at sort of posing in front of the camera and doing sort of active Cindy Sherman-esque poses, then we would spend so much time on their photography. And I was like, what about form? Like, isn't that like interesting as well? Like, how come they can't see what I'm seeing? And so this this is a little bit of a coincidence. April 9th, 2017, to L. Don't know if you've seen this, but it was worth thinking about. I love the kind of work he's talking about. So now I'm just thinking. This was an article that Sebastian Smee wrote about Liz Deschênes' exhibition at the ICA, an art world malaise and a show at the ICA. I have had the chance to see these in person. There's something about the way your reflection is not only multiplied but also frozen in between different frames. But, Sebastian Smee says, it's a part of art history of zombie academics, sclerotic bureaucracy, and a blinkered elite. Elevation is a number series of die transfer prints, divorced from their referent. What could this augur? The seemingly non-referential prints retain symbolic content, if you say so. But do we want symbolic content at this point, or don't we? Will all these questions somehow make Elevation more convincing as a work of... Green screen number 4, both a photograph and a backdrop, a stand-in for the thing itself. As darker skin tones do not composite well on blue screens, the move to green screens also signaled the increased visibility of African Americans in the cultural and entertainment realm. Do you feel the malaise? You cut out tendentious, imprecise, and overused verbs like interrogate, reference, disrupt, and explore. You cut away the art itself. It can't survive without them. The question is, does it deserve to? Oh, shit. I remember reading this and being really conflicted, thinking, how he completely just derailed this photography, but maybe because it was that Sebastian was looking for something in the photo. He wanted them to answer this politics. He wanted them to evoke the things that it was reaching for. He couldn't see in the green screen piece that maybe it was sort of like a subtler referent. And so I asked Elle if process, and she responds with questions, and I still refer back to this conversation. If process isn't visible, is it valuable information? What do we need to know? Something I've been thinking about generally in the classroom in my own work and picking up from the general landscape of communication around contemporary art production is this idea that there could be a just formal. What is just formal? I guess the idea that one could ever lose a subject I have trouble understanding. Form is a subject, but also has a history of references, comes from culture. Nothing is empty. So the question to me from minimalism seems to be, can there be an emptiness found? Almost like breaking art down elementally to its most bare, atomized existence. Just Lawrence Weiner from the Bronx. Lawrence Weiner, for example. Self-taught as an artist, his urgency to make art broadly available and engaging stems, he says, from his childhood in the South Bronx. I didn't have the advantage of a middle-class perspective. Art was something else. Art was the notations on the wall, or the messages left by other people. I grew up in a city where I had read the walls. I still read the walls. I love to put work of mine out on the walls and let people read it. Some will remember it, and then somebody else comes along and puts something else over it. It becomes archaeology rather than history. So Lawrence Weiner's economy of gesture doesn't come from nowhere. There's something in experimentation. There's something in form that's lingering. Like his growing up in the South Bronx. And that began to sort of spark a question for me. Sort of, where does form come from, right? Questions, 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 I said. I don't know what it is that I love about form. It's hard to defend because it's not symbolic. Elle, maybe that's what, for me, makes it magical. Its meaning isn't coming from what you've been conditioned to understand it as, but the way it defies what you expect from the material world and the way it's supposed to function. Form without function confuses and excites our monkey brains with familiarity, but inoperability makes us think. Why do we feel like we have to know everything? Why do we feel the need to be smarter than we are? That we have to understand it all immediately? Quick thought. Isn't physical experience also meaning or knowing, separate but potentially as important as an intellectual meaning or intellectual knowing? I don't know anymore. I've been writing this Glow post for about an hour and a half. I have a lot of questions I hope we'll have the chance to discuss. Can we do that tomorrow? I'm a little scared because I don't know if I have the backing to back up form, but I want to discuss it anyway. Half of me wonders if I was too scared to take photographs of people and was hiding behind form. And half of me wonders, okay, no, that's definitely not true. photographs of form and the decisions that make you capture that, there's lingering behind it. Photographs of experimentation have their own merit. 100% they do. I think the best example of this is Bernice Abbott. She makes her portraits. They're not just straight portraits, like the one with James Joyce in an eye patch, or she makes documentary photographs where the Brooklyn Bridge is sort of just creeping out. There, she's very clearly understood the limitations or what you expect to see from a photograph, documentary, so to speak, and sort of pushes out, has this idea of a change in New York, has this idea of something subtle there, or with her photographs of science, so to speak. There's some magic in there. There has to be. I mean, look at this photograph. I mean, Bernice Abbott, Gregory Crewdson, Bernice Abbott Science. Look at these. Some sort of scattering of water. All these stopped frames of balls, or this scattering light, reflecting light. There's this idea of her rebellion, or her radicalism is in making science visible through photography, through something that was not allowed for people to see, much less women. So she was in the lab, maybe also referencing the scientific specific process of photography itself too. This idea that Bernice Abbott took over at Jay's Photographs, helped Man Ray print. But women have been there from the beginning, sort of defying experimentation, maybe even laying the groundwork for the medium that we only see men in now. And in these sort of photographs of science, or in her decisions to make these, I'm reminded of Lawrence Weiner, who makes things on walls because he grew up seeing things on walls. There's a deeply personal element to experimentation that comes through that we shouldn't discount. Just because the work isn't about motherhood or femininity or rebelling against that doesn't mean that it's not valid. And the fact that we would want it to be about that is a little problematic. That's almost perpetuating the system, I would think. Because throughout all the oppression, women have been making work. They simply have been experimenting. And maybe it's both. It's like this oxymoron. It's like the system has oppressed them, but our obsession with the system, I feel like, has made us try to find good women artists, great women artists who can sort of match up to men. Whereas these photographs, Tina Modotti's photographs, they're simply not just, they're just never seen. And I've been having this in my mind. Let me show you my Bernice Abbotts. So my professor, Zach Arkander, as an assignment, told me to copy a photographer as close as I could. That sounded almost too simple, but he warned me that everyone had nearly failed that assignment on the first try at Yale. So here I was going through Williamstown, trying to make portraits and trying to make photographs like Bernice Abbott. Like, what was she seeing? How was she seeing? And then you start to realize that photography is connected to seeing. The idea of photography is accident. Maybe it's no accident because you sort of see and frame and understand things the way you process them. Does that make any sense? So here's me not trying to be myself, but trying to be Bernice Abbott. Here, I mean, this is in New York, but what is that? Oh. Trying to emulate Bernice Abbott. I said this as I began my presentation, but I typically write, and I don't really make. And coming into this class, or accepting this fact that I'm making, or I'm a maker, was tough. I mean, let me show you this review here. I just reviewed Zoe Leonard's exhibition at the Whitney, And here you see, I mean, it looks organized. There are paragraphs and there are sentences, and it looks, I mean, don't read it, but it looks like, but let me show you how it first starts. We go here. It's scattered thoughts. How can I write this gently, softly, thoughtfully? I guess you just have to have that in mind then. How can a simple thing just mobilize it all, cause a rush? Red of the bricked up wall, sumptuous, trace of silver in the river, warm glint of the sun shining down on it. A moment, a stray glance, something that sticks. And isn't that just the instant that makes you squeeze the shutter? But when do you fix the image? And what do you lose when you do? Looking through the viewfinder, maybe you're missing the moment itself. I think Zoe Leonard's photography is quite transitory, actually. Blown away? And in her photograph of Niagara Falls, the photograph feels sculptural. There's an unexpected way of entry, looking down into the pit that is where Niagara Falls flows and roars into. But the mist collapses that height, making you feel small but charged. Powerful as you can see the foaming water, frost and fringes and otherwise dark waters like a very physical dust that sits on top of the photograph. Immigrants, swallowing up white paper, torn edges and crumbling, looking at it again. Reloved, recharged, cradled by the paper, made into a new photograph. These her most recent photographs where she photographed her family against these white backdrops. But this is how it starts. I don't have the actual Zoe Leonard notebook with me, but there are lines in these notebooks, but I don't actually know why I get lined notebooks. Maybe it's just like a hinting at some order of form. Like you can see how this just arrow, arrow, arrow. It's like all these associations that I'm making as if like here's a detail that I like, here's a detail that I like. And these notebooks, I only have 2 of them here, but I use these notebooks for everything. There's another one right here. Growing up, I didn't have art in my childhood. And I would go to museums and I would fill these notebooks up with questions and descriptions of works of art. And that's my personal experience of getting to know art. And I feel like it was a subtle experience. It reminds me of that question of form, of having experimentation somewhere sort of embedded in your mind, where as you're going out and you're looking at the world, there are different sort of things that you're seeing. And in taking Women in Photography, I don't know in the 6 weeks that I reached any sort of conclusion. Maybe it isn't about a conclusion. It's not about having a final presentation that has all the stats that makes us wary and more aware of what's going on and how there's women being left out of the medium. Maybe it's a realization of women are still making work against that oppressive system, and we need to pay attention to that. Nietzsche and Libby at the Baxter Street Camera Club in New York, their practice as a printing press, as a camera club on all different levels. Like I said earlier, I think it's a little bit of both. It's recognizing that the system oppresses, but it's also recognizing that women have been making work through that oppression already. And the fact that Zoe Leonard felt the need to put Linda Nochlund's essay on vinyl in the curatorial offices means that even if it's something that we keep in mind, maybe the systems are so deeply rooted that those artists, those female photographers just don't come up. Like we don't notice them. Like Katie Hubbard, Thea Backstrom, Moira Davey. This might just be a reflection of my ignorance, but I never learned about these photographers or these artists in my contemporary photo classes. Because you always have like the big heavyweights. You have the people who are making photographic work that looks sculptural and painterly and fictional. We can get into that some other time. But maybe it's because I think this class has been about a thought entering the work. Realizing that experimentation and pushing has been what women have been doing. Constance Fox Talbot made some of the first photographs. Tina Modotti reminded us that photography is a social endeavor. I wonder if the takeaway from it is to not to discount, the theories of systems being oppressive, but I wonder if it's just to keep making. As I hope to be a curator one day, to be aware of the divide and to just be picking differently. Like, let's say I have a show, and they're all artists I'm very excited about. What if I go back and realize that they're all white men? What are we not seeing? Where are the women making these works? We know they're there, as we've seen, in some of the people that I've pointed out. There is a lot of work out there by a lot of women. Um, Moira Davey, if you're watching this, thank you. I'm not totally sure I grasp 50 minutes yet, but I would like to watch it over and over again. It's an idea to parse out. There are many strands in that, where you're blowing dust off of the spines of those books. Stendhal, Berger, Seeing. I don't think there's a final word here. It's a balance. It's a continuation of that question. There's no final work of art. There's no final presentation with stats. We know that the stats are getting a little better. But this class has told me that the open question is key. Stats are getting better, yes. Focus on dismantling the system, yes. Focus on the fact that women are making work out there, yes. Don't separate them into a group. Don't expect them to be only making work about, motherhood and femininity, though they can be. Of course they can. I think it's a question of being open and recognizing that this is a conversation that you need to be having every time you're looking at an artist. It should enter your mind subtly. It should be like that idea of, hey, now I'm making photographs of science. Women haven't been in the lab. I'm putting my work on the walls because that's how I read things, Lawrence Weiner, growing up. I'm thinking about women every time I make a curatorial decision because it would be remiss not to look at some of the best artists of our time.